The wind cut through the canyon like a blade, and Emma Hartwell's fingers trembled as she tried to thread the needle through the worn leather of her only pair of gloves, knowing that if she failed to repair them before the winter fully set in, her hands would crack and bleed during the long rides she made delivering mail across the New Mexico territory in the bitter December of 1883. She sat on a flat rock just outside the way station at Copper Creek, squinting in the late afternoon sun that did nothing to warm the frigid air. The gloves had been her father's once, back when he ran the mail route before consumption took him 2 years ago. Now they were hers, patched and repatched so many times that the original leather was barely visible beneath the crude stitching. Her fingers ached from the cold as she worked the needle, trying to close a tear along the thumb that had opened that morning when she had grabbed her horse's reins too roughly. Emma had not heard the approach of the rider until his shadow fell across her work. She looked up sharply, her hand instinctively moving toward the small pistol at her hip, but she relaxed when she saw it was just a cowboy, tall and lean, sitting easy in his saddle. His horse was a fine chestnut mare, well cared for, and the man himself had the weathered look of someone who spent his life under the open sky. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his hat and eyes that were a startling shade of blue in his sun-bronzed face. "Did not mean to startle you, miss," he said, tipping his hat. His voice was low and pleasant, with a trace of a drawl that suggested he had come from Texas originally. "Just riding through to Santa Fe, saw you working there and thought maybe you needed some help." "I can manage," Emma said, perhaps more sharply than she intended. She was 23 and had been managing on her own for quite some time now. The last thing she needed was some stranger thinking she was helpless. The cowboy dismounted anyway, moving with an easy grace that spoke of years in the saddle. He was taller than she had thought, and as he came closer she could see that his clothes, while worn, were clean and well-maintained. He had a kind face, she thought, with smile lines around his eyes and mouth. "I can see that," he said mildly, looking down at her attempts to repair the glove. "But those gloves are about done for, if you do not mind my saying so. How long have you been wearing them?" "Long enough," Emma said. She jabbed the needle through the leather again, but her cold fingers slipped and the needle skittered away, falling between the rocks. She bit back a curse and began searching for it. The cowboy crouched down to help her look, and after a moment he found the needle wedged in a crack. He handed it to her, but his eyes were troubled as he looked at her hands. They were red and chapped, the nails broken short, the skin around her knuckles split from the cold and the hard work. "Miss," he said slowly, "I do not mean to presume, but what exactly do you do that you need gloves so badly?" "I carry the mail," Emma said, taking the needle from him. "Copper Creek to Santa Fe and back 3 times a week, sometimes more if there are special deliveries." His eyebrows rose. "That is a hard ride even in good weather. In winter it must be brutal." "It pays," Emma said simply. It was the truth. The mail service paid better than most jobs available to a woman on her own, and she had a reputation for being reliable. Rain, snow, or shine, Emma Hartwell delivered the mail. The cowboy was quiet for a moment, watching her struggle with the glove. Then quite suddenly he began pulling off his own gloves. They were beautiful things, made of soft brown leather with reinforced palms and fingers, clearly expensive and well-made. "Take mine," he said, holding them out to her. "I will make do on my own." Emma stared at him as if he had lost his mind. "I cannot take your gloves," she said. "You will need them. Winter is just beginning." "I have another pair in my saddlebags," he said. It was a lie and they both knew it, but he said it so easily that Emma almost believed him. "These are too small for me anyway. I bought them in town a few weeks back and they never fit right. You would be doing me a favor by taking them off my hands." Emma looked at the gloves, then at her own pitiful pair, then back at the cowboy. His face was open and honest, without a trace of pity, just a simple offer of help from one traveler to another. "I cannot just take them," she said. "I would have to pay you." "No need," he said. Consider it a gift, or if it makes you feel better, consider it payment for some information. I am looking for work around Santa Fe. Know anyone who might be hiring? Emma hesitated, then slowly reached out and took the gloves. They were warm from his hands and impossibly soft against her rough fingers. When she slipped them on, they fit perfectly, hugging her hands like a second skin. The Broken Arrow Ranch, about 10 miles north of Santa Fe, she said. The owner, Matthew Carson, is always looking for good hands. Tell him Emma Hartwell sent you and he will give you a fair hearing. Emma Hartwell, the cowboy repeated and smiled. That is a good, strong name. I am Jack Brennan, late of Austin, Texas, and currently wandering wherever the wind takes me. Why did you leave Texas? Emma asked. She knew she should not pry, but there was something about Jack Brennan that made her curious. His smile faded slightly. My father died last spring. Left the ranch to my older brother, which was right and proper, but there was not enough work for both of us. So I sold my share to him and headed west to make my own way. I am sorry about your father, Emma said softly. Thank you. And I am sorry that you are out here alone doing such hard work. Is there no one to help you? There is just me, Emma said. My father died 2 years ago. My mother passed when I was young. I have an aunt in Philadelphia who writes sometimes, asking me to come live with her, but I cannot imagine leaving this place. It is my home. Jack nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. I know that feeling. Texas will always be home to me, even though I cannot go back. They stood there for a moment in companionable silence. Two people who understood what it meant to be alone in the world but too stubborn to give up the life they had chosen. I should get going, Emma said finally. I have a delivery to make before dark, and the road to Santa Fe is not safe after sunset. May I ride with you partway? Jack asked. I am heading that direction anyway, and it would be nice to have company. Emma considered this. She usually rode alone, preferring her own thoughts to conversation, but there was something about Jack Brennan that made her want to say yes. All right, she said. But keep up. I do not slow down for anyone. Jack grinned, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to truly striking. I would not dream of asking you to. They mounted their horses and set off together, riding side by side along the narrow trail that wound through the red rock canyons. Emma's horse, a tough little Mustang named Dusty, was used to the hard pace she set, and Jack's chestnut mare kept up easily. The sun was sinking lower in the sky, painting the rocks in shades of gold and crimson, and the air grew colder as they rode. Jack proved to be an easy companion, neither talking too much nor falling into sullen silence. He pointed out a golden eagle soaring overhead and showed her the tracks of a mountain lion in the dust, evidence that they were not the only travelers on this road. Emma found herself relaxing in his presence, enjoying the simple pleasure of having someone to share the journey with. How did you end up carrying the mail? Jack asked as they rode. It seems like an unusual job for a woman. My father taught me to ride when I was young, Emma said. After he died, I needed work and the Postal Service needed someone willing to make the hard rides. I proved I could do it and they gave me the route. Do you ever get scared, riding alone through country like this? Emma considered the question. Sometimes, she admitted. There are bandits and wild animals and the weather can turn deadly in minutes. But I am careful and I know these trails better than anyone. I have never missed a delivery. That is something to be proud of, Jack said. They rode on, and Emma found herself stealing glances at Jack when she thought he was not looking. He sat his horse like he had been born in the saddle, moving with the mare's rhythm effortlessly. His profile was strong and clean-lined, and there was a quiet competence about him that she found deeply appealing. It had been a long time since Emma had thought about a man in that way, and the realization made her uncomfortable. She did not have time for romance or distraction. Her life was hard enough without adding complications. As they rode, the sun continued its descent toward the horizon. Emma knew every rock and bush along this trail, every place where the path narrowed or the footing became treacherous. They were about halfway to Santa Fe when she noticed that Jack's hands on the reins were red with cold. "Your hands," she said, nodding toward them. "They must be freezing." "I am fine," Jack said, but she could see him flexing his fingers, trying to keep the blood flowing. Emma felt a wave of guilt wash over her. Here she was, warm and comfortable in his gloves while he suffered in silence. "Take them back," she said, beginning to pull off the gloves. "I cannot let you freeze while I am comfortable." "No," Jack said firmly. "You need them more than I do. You have days of riding ahead of you. I just have to make it to Santa Fe tonight, and then I will be inside somewhere warm." "But your hands will be fine," he said. He smiled at her, and there was something in that smile that made her chest feel tight. "Besides, I gave them to you. A man does not take back a gift." They argued about it for a few more minutes, but Jack was stubborn, and eventually Emma gave up. She promised herself that when they reached Santa Fe, she would find a way to repay him for his kindness. The trail narrowed as they entered a canyon, and they had to ride single file, Jack taking the lead. The walls rose high on either side of them, blocking out the last of the sunlight and plunging them into deep shadow. Emma's hand moved instinctively to her pistol, her eyes scanning the rocks above them for any sign of danger. This was a perfect place for an ambush, and she had been through here too many times not to be cautious. They were almost through the canyon when she heard it, the click of a rifle being cocked, echoing off the stone walls. "Hold up there," a voice called out. "Nice and easy now." Emma's heart sank. 3 men emerged from behind the rocks, all of them holding rifles pointed at Emma and Jack. They were rough-looking characters, with the hard eyes and cruel mouths of men who lived by taking what they wanted from others. "Well, well," the leader said, a big man with a scar running down his left cheek. "What do we have here? A cowboy and his sweetheart out for an evening ride." "We do not want any trouble," Jack said calmly. "We are just passing through." "I am sure you are," the scarred man said. "But you see, this is our canyon, and there is a toll for passing through. We will take your horses, your guns, and any money you might be carrying. Maybe we will even take the lady if she is friendly." The other 2 men laughed at that, and Emma felt ice run through her veins. Her hand tightened on her pistol grip. "That is not going to happen," Jack said. His voice was still calm, but there was steel beneath the words now. "Let us pass, and nobody has to get hurt. You think you are fast enough to shoot all 3 of us before we put you down?" The leader asked, grinning, "Because I do not think you are." Emma's mind was racing. 3 men, all with rifles already aimed at them. Even if she and Jack drew their pistols, they would be lucky to take down one of them before the others shot them. But she was not going to give up without a fight. "What is it going to be?" the scarred man asked. Jack glanced at Emma, and in his eyes she saw not fear but calculation. He was measuring the odds, looking for an opening, and she realized that he was no stranger to trouble. "All right," Jack said slowly. "You win. We will give you what you want. Just let the lady go. She is just a mail carrier, nothing to do with me." "Nice try," the leader said. "But I think we will keep both of you, at least until we have searched your saddlebags." He moved forward, and as he did, his attention shifted slightly away from Jack. It was only for a moment, but it was enough. Jack's hand flashed to his pistol, faster than Emma would have thought possible, and the canyon erupted in gunfire. Emma drew her own gun and fired at the man to the left, seeing him jerk backward as her bullet took him in the shoulder. Jack's shot had hit the leader in the chest, and he was falling, his rifle clattering on the rocks. The 3rd man fired wildly, his bullet ricocheting off the canyon wall, and then Jack's 2nd shot caught him in the leg and he went down screaming. The whole thing was over in seconds. The leader was dead, the man Emma had shot was clutching his bleeding shoulder and moaning, and the 3rd was writhing on the ground holding his shattered leg. Jack dismounted quickly, keeping his gun trained on the wounded men as he kicked their rifles away. "Emma, check on them," he said tersely. "Make sure they are not going to bleed out before we can get the sheriff." Emma's hands were shaking as she dismounted, but she forced herself to move forward. The man with the leg wound was in bad shape, blood pumping between his fingers, and she knew that if they did not stop the bleeding soon, he would die. "I need something for a tourniquet," she said. Jack pulled off his bandana and tossed it to her, and she tied it tightly around the man's thigh above the wound, twisting it until the bleeding slowed to a trickle. The man with the shoulder wound was not as badly hurt, though he was pale and trembling. "You shot me," he said, staring at Emma in disbelief. "A woman shot me. You were going to rob us," Emma said shortly. "You are lucky I did not aim higher." Jack had found some rope in one of the bandits' saddlebags, and he tied the two wounded men securely, making sure they could not escape or cause any more trouble. Then he stood and looked at Emma, his face grave. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am fine," Emma said. She was lying. Her hands were still shaking and she felt sick to her stomach, but she was not about to admit that to him. "We need to get these men to Santa Fe. The sheriff will want to question them." "I know," Jack said. "But that was good shooting, Emma. You saved both our lives back there." Emma looked at the dead man, the scarred face now slack and empty, and felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She had never killed anyone before, and the knowledge that she had come so close today was overwhelming. "Hey," Jack said gently, moving to her side. "Look at me, Emma, look at me." She raised her eyes to his, and the kindness she saw there was almost her undoing. "You did what you had to do," he said. "They would have killed us both and never lost a minute of sleep over it. You defended yourself, and there is no shame in that." Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Jack stood close to her for a moment longer, as if he wanted to put his arms around her but was not sure if she would welcome the gesture. Then he stepped back and turned his attention to the practical problem of getting the wounded bandits and themselves to Santa Fe. They loaded the dead man across his horse and tied the two wounded men in their saddles, making sure they could not escape even if they tried. Then they mounted their own horses and continued towards Santa Fe, leading the bandits' horses behind them. It was full dark by the time they reached the town, and the lamps were being lit in the windows of the houses and saloons. Emma led the way to the sheriff's office, a low adobe building near the center of town. Sheriff Tom Garrett was just finishing his dinner when they arrived, and he came to the door wiping his mouth on his sleeve. "Emma," he said in surprise. "What have you got here?" "Bandits," Emma said wearily. "They tried to rob us in the canyon, one dead, two wounded." The sheriff's eyes widened as he took in the scene. The body, the wounded men, and Jack standing calmly beside Emma with blood on his shirt and a gun still in his hand. "You better come inside and tell me the whole story," Garrett said. "I will have my deputy take care of the prisoners." They spent the next hour in the sheriff's office, recounting what had happened. Garrett took careful notes, asking questions about the exact location of the ambush and the sequence of events. When Emma described how Jack had drawn and fired first, saving both their lives, the sheriff looked at Jack with new respect. "You are mighty fast with that gun," Garrett said. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My father taught me," Jack said. He was a Texas Ranger before he started ranching. He always said that in this country, a man who could not defend himself would not last long. "Your father was right," Garrett said. He turned to Emma. "And you held your own too, from what you have told me." "Most women would have frozen up in a situation like that." "My father taught me as well," Emma said. "He said a mail carrier had to be ready for anything." Garrett nodded approvingly. "Your father was a good man, Emma. He would be proud of how you handled yourself today." He turned back to Jack. "What brings you to Santa Fe, Mr. Brennan?" "Looking for work," Jack said. "Emma told me that the Broken Arrow Ranch might be hiring." "They are," Garrett confirmed. "Matt Carson lost 2 hands last month to the silver mines. He will be glad to have someone with your skills." He paused, then added, "Though I have to say, you might want to consider applying for a deputy position. We could use someone who can think fast and shoot straight." Jack smiled but shook his head. "I appreciate the offer, Sheriff, but I am a cattleman at heart. I would not be happy stuck in town all day." "Fair enough," Garrett said. "Well, you two are free to go. I will need you back here tomorrow to sign statements, but for tonight, get some rest. You have earned it." Emma and Jack left the sheriff's office and stood together on the wooden sidewalk, suddenly aware that they were alone again. The street was quiet, most people already inside for the night, and the air was bitterly cold. "I should find a place to stay," Jack said. "Is there a decent hotel in town?" "The Grand Hotel is just down the street," Emma said, pointing. "It is clean and not too expensive." "Will you be staying there too?" Jack asked. Emma shook her head. "I have a small room at the boarding house on the edge of town. Mrs. Patterson rents it to me for almost nothing because I bring her letters from her daughter in Denver." They stood there for a moment, neither one quite ready to part ways. Emma realized that in the space of a few hours, Jack Brennan had become important to her in a way she did not fully understand. He had risked his life to protect her, and together they had survived something that could have easily killed them both. That created a bond that was not easily broken. "Thank you," she said softly, "for the gloves and for everything else. I do not know what would have happened if you had not been there." "You would have figured something out," Jack said. "You are one of the strongest women I have ever met, Emma Hartwell." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks, grateful for the darkness that hid her blush. "I should go," she said. "Mrs. Patterson will be worried." "May I see you again?" Jack asked. The question was simple, but the way he said it made it clear that he was asking for more than just a friendly meeting. Emma hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to take this chance at something more than the lonely life she had been living. But another part of her was afraid. Afraid of getting hurt, afraid of losing the independence she had fought so hard to maintain, afraid of wanting something she could not have. "I will be at the Broken Arrow tomorrow," Jack said when she did not answer immediately. "If you are ever out that way, stop by. I would like to see you again, Emma, very much." "I deliver mail out there every week," Emma said, surprising herself. "I will stop by." Jack's smile was brilliant even in the dim light from the street lamps. "I will look forward to it." They said goodnight, and Emma walked through the cold dark streets to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, her mind full of Jack Brennan's blue eyes and easy smile. When she let herself into her small room, she took off the gloves he had given her and ran her fingers over the soft leather. They still carried the faint warmth of his hands, and she held them for a long moment before carefully setting them on the small table by her bed. That night, Emma dreamed of the canyon and the gunfight, but in her dreams it was Jack who was shot instead of the bandits, his blood dark on the rocks, and she woke with tears on her face and her heart pounding. She lay in the darkness, listening to the wind outside her window, and acknowledged what she had been trying to ignore all evening. Jack Brennan had gotten under her skin in a way no man ever had before, and the thought of anything happening to him was unbearable. The next morning, Emma went to the sheriff's office and signed her statement, confirming everything that had happened in the canyon. Sheriff Garrett told her that the 2 wounded bandits had confessed to a string of robberies along the Santa Fe Trail, and that there was a reward for their capture. He promised to see that Emma and Jack each received their share. "That is good news," Emma said. "The money would help her get through the winter, maybe even buy some new clothes and supplies." "There is something else," Garrett said. "I had a telegram this morning from the territorial governor. He has been concerned about the robberies along the mail routes, and he wants to expand the postal service to include armed escorts for the carriers. He is asking me to recommend someone for the job." Emma felt a flutter of unease. "Are you saying I cannot carry the mail anymore?" No, Garrett said quickly. "Nothing like that, but the governor wants to make sure the mail carriers are protected. I was thinking that maybe your friend Mr. Brennan might be interested in the job. He would ride with you on your routes, make sure nobody gives you any trouble." Emma thought about what it would be like to have Jack riding beside her 3 times a week, and her heart gave a traitorous leap, but she forced herself to consider it practically. Would he still be able to work at the Broken Arrow? "I would work it out with Matt Carson," Garrett said. "The ranch is on your route anyway. Brennan could work the ranch in between your mail runs. It would give him steady income from 2 sources." "You should ask him," Emma said. "I cannot speak for him." "I will," Garrett said, but I wanted to make sure you would be comfortable with the arrangement. Some people do not like having someone looking over their shoulder while they work. Emma thought about this. It was true that she valued her independence, but the truth was that she had enjoyed riding with Jack yesterday. He had not tried to take over or treat her like she was helpless. He had simply been there, a solid presence at her side, and she had felt safer with him than she ever had alone. "I would be comfortable with it," she said, "if Jack wants the job." She left the sheriff's office and spent the rest of the day completing her mail deliveries around Santa Fe. The gloves Jack had given her made all the difference, keeping her hands warm and protected as she rode from house to house, ranch to ranch, delivering letters and packages to people eager for news from the outside world. It was late afternoon when she finally finished her rounds and turned dusty toward the Broken Arrow Ranch. She told herself that she was just being polite, checking to see if Jack had found work, but she knew it was more than that. She wanted to see him again, to make sure he was all right, to feel that flutter in her chest when he smiled at her. The Broken Arrow was a sprawling operation with a big ranch house, several barns, and extensive corrals. As Emma rode up the long drive, she could see cattle grazing in the distance and several cowboys working near the barns. She asked one of them where she could find Jack Brennan, and he pointed toward the breaking corral, where a tall figure was working with a young horse. Emma dismounted and walked over to the corral fence, leaning against it to watch. Jack was in the center of the ring with a buckskin gelding, moving slowly and speaking in a low, calm voice. The horse was skittish, dancing away every time Jack tried to approach, but he was patient, never rushing, never losing his temper. Gradually, the horse settled, allowing Jack to come closer, and finally, Jack was able to lay his hand on the animal's neck. Emma watched, fascinated by the gentleness in Jack's movements, the obvious care he took with the frightened animal. It was a side of him she had not seen before, this tender patience, and it made her like him even more. Jack must have sensed her presence because he looked up suddenly and saw her standing by the fence. His face lit up with such obvious pleasure that Emma felt warmth spread through her chest despite the cold air. He left the horse and came over to her, ducking through the fence rails with easy agility. "Emma," he said, "I was hoping you would come by." "I told you I would," Emma said. She noticed that his hands were red and raw from the cold, and guilt stabbed through her again. "Your hands look terrible." "Did you really not have another pair of gloves?" Jack looked down at his hands ruefully. "I might have exaggerated about that," he admitted, "but it was worth it to see you warm and comfortable." "Jack Brennan, you are a fool," Emma said, but there was no heat in her words. She pulled off the gloves he had given her and held them out. "Take them. We can share them until we can get you another pair." "I will not take them back," Jack said stubbornly. "Then I will just have to put them on you myself," Emma said. Before she could lose her nerve, she took his hands in hers and slipped the gloves onto them, one at a time. His hands were cold and rough, his fingers longer than hers, and the gloves fit him better than they had fit her. Jack looked down at their joined hands, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up at her, and Emma saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Emma," he said softly, "I need to tell you something. I have not been able to stop thinking about you since yesterday. I know we just met, and I know you probably think I am crazy, but there is something between us. I felt it the moment I saw you sitting on that rock, trying to fix your gloves, and I have felt it every minute since. Tell me I am not imagining it." Emma's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "You are not imagining it," she whispered. "I feel it too." Jack smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Then may I court you properly, Miss Hartwell? Take you to dinner, walk with you, get to know you the way I want to?" "Yes," Emma said. The word came out without hesitation, and she realized that this was what she wanted, what she had been wanting since the moment Jack had offered her his gloves. "Yes, I would like that very much." They stood there by the corral fence, hands joined, smiling at each other like fools, until one of the other ranch hands walked by and cleared his throat loudly. Jack laughed and stepped back, though he kept hold of Emma's hand for a moment longer before releasing it. "I should let you get back to work," Emma said reluctantly. "Actually, I have something to tell you," Jack said. "Sheriff Garrett came by this morning. He offered me a job as your escort on the mail runs, said the territorial governor wants armed protection for the mail carriers." "He told me about that," Emma said. "What did you say?" "I said yes," Jack said. "I talked it over with Mr. Carson and he agreed to let me work the ranch in between your runs. It means I will get to see you 3 times a week at least, maybe more. That is, if you do not mind having me along." "I do not mind," Emma said. Her cheeks hurt from smiling so much. "In fact, I think I would like it very much." "Good," Jack said, "because I start tomorrow." "When is your next run?" "Day after tomorrow," Emma said. "I go to Copper Creek and back. It is a long ride, about 12 hours round trip." "I will be ready," Jack promised. They talked for a few more minutes, making arrangements for where to meet and what time to leave. Then Emma reluctantly said goodbye and mounted Dusty for the ride back to Santa Fe. As she rode away, she turned in her saddle to look back and saw Jack still standing by the corral, watching her go. He raised his hand in farewell, and she waved back, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. The next 2 days passed slowly. Emma went about her usual routines, delivering mail around Santa Fe, tending to Dusty, and repairing her tack and equipment. But her mind was constantly on Jack, wondering what he was doing, whether he was thinking about her the way she was thinking about him. She also used the time to buy Jack a new pair of gloves from the general store, spending more money than she probably should have, but unable to resist getting him something warm and well-made. She wrapped them carefully and tucked them into her saddlebags, planning to give them to him on their ride. On the morning of the mail run, Emma woke before dawn and dressed carefully. She told herself that she was not trying to look pretty for Jack, that her usual wool trousers and heavy coat were purely practical. But she found herself taking extra care with her hair, braiding it neatly and pinning it up under her hat. She even dabbed a bit of rose water on her wrists, a luxury she rarely indulged in. Jack was waiting for her at the edge of town, sitting tall and straight on his chestnut mare. He had a rifle in a scabbard on his saddle and his pistol on his hip, looking every inch the capable guardian. But when he saw Emma approaching, his serious expression melted into a warm smile. "Good morning," he said. "Ready to ride, always," Emma said. She reached into her saddlebags and pulled out the wrapped package. "I got you something." Jack took the package and unwrapped it, his eyes widening when he saw the gloves. They were good quality leather lined with soft wool, exactly the kind a man needed for winter riding. "Emma, you should not have," he said. "These must have cost." "Never mind what they cost," Emma said firmly. "You gave me yours and I am giving you these. Now we both have gloves and nobody has to freeze." Jack pulled on the gloves, flexing his fingers to test the fit. They were perfect, and from the expression on his face, Emma knew he was touched by the gift. "Thank you," he said quietly. "This is one of the kindest things anyone has ever done for me. You gave me your gloves when I needed them," Emma said. "I am just returning the favor." They set off together as the sun rose over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The air was cold and crisp, their breath forming clouds in front of them, but Emma felt warm all the way through. Having Jack riding beside her changed everything. The trail that had seemed lonely and dangerous when she rode alone now felt like an adventure, full of possibilities. As they rode, they talked. Jack told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to ride and rope from his father, about the ranch that had been his whole world until he had to leave it behind. Emma told him about her childhood in New Mexico, about her mother's death when she was 10, about taking over the mail route after her father died, and the satisfaction she found in doing work that mattered. "Do you ever get lonely?" Jack asked as they crossed a wide plateau dotted with juniper trees. "Riding by yourself all the time?" I used to not think about it, Emma admitted. I was too busy trying to survive to prove I could do the job. But lately, yes, I have been lonely. It is a hard life, Jack, beautiful but hard. It does not have to be lonely anymore, Jack said. He looked at her intently. I meant what I said, Emma. I want to court you properly. I want to spend time with you, get to know everything about you, and if you feel the same way I do, well, maybe it could turn into something more. Emma felt her heart skip a beat. It was too soon, part of her insisted. They had only known each other for a few days. But another part of her, the part that had been alone for so long, wanted to leap at this chance for happiness. I would like that, she said softly. But you should know, Jack, I am not an easy woman to be with. I am stubborn and independent, and I will not give up my work for anyone. I would never ask you to, Jack said. I like that you are strong and capable. I like that you do not need me to take care of you. But maybe we could take care of each other instead. It was such a simple thing to say, but it struck Emma deeply. She had spent so long trying to prove she did not need anyone that she had forgotten what it felt like to want someone, to let herself be vulnerable enough to accept help and companionship. I would like that too, she said. They rode on, and as the morning wore into afternoon, Emma pointed out landmarks and told Jack stories about the people who lived along the route. There was old Samuel Morrison, who lived alone in a cabin and waited eagerly for letters from his children back east. There was the Garcia family with their 6 children and thriving farm. There was the schoolteacher, Miss Abigail Stone, who ordered books from catalogs and relied on Emma to bring them. At each stop, Emma introduced Jack as her new escort, and people welcomed him warmly. They had all heard about the bandits in the canyon, and several people thanked Jack for protecting Emma. He handled the attention with modesty and grace, never boasting or taking more credit than he deserved. It was late afternoon when they reached Copper Creek, and Emma picked up the outbound mail for the return journey. They rested the horses and ate a quick meal at the way station, then started the long ride back to Santa Fe. The sun was setting as they rode through the canyon where the bandits had ambushed them. Emma felt herself tense automatically, her eyes scanning the rocks for any sign of danger, but Jack rode calm and alert beside her, and his presence made her feel safe. "Does it bother you?" Jack asked quietly. "Being back here, a little," Emma admitted. "I keep thinking about what could have happened if you had not been there, if I had been alone." "But you were not alone," Jack said firmly, "and you will not be alone again. I am here now, Emma, and I am not going anywhere unless you tell me to go." Emma reached across the space between their horses and took his hand, squeezing it briefly before letting go. "I am glad you are here," she said simply. They made it back to Santa Fe well after dark, both of them tired but satisfied with the day's work. Jack helped Emma stable Dusty and tend to the horses, working alongside her with easy competence. When the horses were settled and fed, they walked together through the quiet streets toward Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. At the front gate, Emma turned to face Jack, suddenly shy. "Thank you for today," she said. "It was nice having company on the ride." "It was more than nice," Jack said. He reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather-light. "Emma, may I take you to dinner tomorrow? Somewhere proper where we can talk without having to worry about bandits or mail schedules?" "I would like that," Emma said. Her skin tingled where he had touched her, and she found herself leaning toward him, drawn by something she could not name. Jack smiled and bent his head, and for a moment Emma thought he was going to kiss her. But instead he pressed his lips gently to her forehead, a sweet, chaste gesture that somehow meant more than a passionate kiss would have. "Good night, Emma," he murmured. "Good night, Jack," she whispered back. She stood at the gate and watched him walk away into the darkness, his tall figure eventually disappearing around a corner. Then she let herself into the boarding house, her mind full of Jack and the way he made her feel, cherished, valued, safe, Mrs. Patterson was waiting for her in the parlor, her knitting needles clicking away as she worked on a shawl. She was a plump, motherly woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You are glowing, dear," she said as Emma came in. Something good must have happened today. Emma could not help but smile. I have met someone, she admitted. A cowboy named Jack Brennan. He is escorting me on the mail runs now. Mrs. Patterson set down her knitting and beamed. Tell me everything, she demanded. Emma sat down and found herself pouring out the whole story, meeting Jack, the gloves, the bandits, the growing feelings between them. Mrs. Patterson listened with rapt attention, occasionally exclaiming or nodding approvingly. He sounds like a good man, she said when Emma had finished. And it is about time you had someone special in your life. You have been alone too long, Emma. It is all happening so fast, Emma said. We only just met a few days ago. Is it crazy to feel this way so quickly? Love does not follow a schedule, Mrs. Patterson said wisely. Sometimes you just know. My husband proposed to me after knowing me for 2 weeks, and we had 43 wonderful years together before he passed. When it is right, you feel it in your bones. Emma thought about this as she went up to her small room. She did feel it in her bones, this certainty that Jack was important, that what was growing between them was real and worth pursuing. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The next evening, Jack called for her at exactly 6 o'clock, dressed in clean clothes and with his hair neatly combed. He took her to the nicest restaurant in Santa Fe, a place called the Desert Rose that Emma had always been too poor to afford. They sat at a table by the window and ate beef steaks with potatoes and fresh bread, talking and laughing like old friends. Jack told her more about his life in Texas, about the pranks he and his brother used to play, about the time he had broken his arm falling off a fence, and his father had set it with grim efficiency before taking him fishing to take his mind off the pain. Emma told him about learning to shoot, about the first time she had delivered the mail alone and how terrified she had been, about the small victories and disappointments that made up her daily life. You are remarkable, Jack said at one point, his blue eyes serious. Do you know that? Most people never have the courage to live the way you do, to take risks and build something on their own. You should be proud of yourself, Emma. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, surprised by how much his words meant to her. Thank you, she said softly. Nobody has ever said anything like that to me before. After dinner, they walked through the plaza, which was lit by lanterns hung from the trees. Musicians were playing somewhere nearby, the sound of guitars and violins floating on the cold night air. Jack offered Emma his arm and she took it, enjoying the warmth of his body close to hers. Emma, Jack said as they walked, I need to be honest with you about something. I am not a rich man. I have some money saved from selling my share of the Texas ranch, but it is not a fortune. I can offer you a good life, a comfortable life, but I cannot promise you luxury or ease. I do not want luxury, Emma said. I want something real, Jack. I want someone who treats me as an equal, who respects what I do and who I am. You are already giving me that. I am falling in love with you, Jack said simply. I know it is soon, and I know I should probably wait to say it, but I am not good at hiding what I feel. From the moment I saw you trying to fix those gloves, something in me just knew. You are the woman I have been looking for all my life. Emma stopped walking and turned to face him. Her heart was pounding, but she felt a certainty that went soul deep. I am falling in love with you too, she said. It scares me how much I feel after so short a time, but I cannot deny it. When I am with you, everything feels right. Jack cupped her face in his gloved hands and bent to kiss her. It was a gentle kiss at first, sweet and questioning, but when Emma rose on her tiptoes and wrapped her arms around his neck, it deepened into something more passionate. She felt like she was drowning in the sensation, in the warmth of his mouth and the strength of his arms around her. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Jack rested his forehead against hers and laughed softly. Emma Hartwell, you are going to be the death of me, he said. I certainly hope not, Emma said. I have plans for you, Jack Brennan. They walked back to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house slowly, reluctant to end the evening. At the gate, Jack kissed her again, and this time Emma let herself get lost in it, memorizing the taste of him, the feel of his hands in her hair. "When can I see you again?" Jack asked when they finally pulled apart. "We have another mail run in 2 days," Emma said. "But maybe you could come by tomorrow for lunch. Mrs. Patterson makes wonderful stew, and I am sure she would be happy to have you." "I will be here," Jack promised. Over the next few weeks, Emma and Jack fell into a pattern. They rode the mail routes together 3 times a week, and in between, Jack worked at the Broken Arrow Ranch and spent every free moment he could with Emma. They had lunch together, took walks through the town, and sat together in Mrs. Patterson's parlor, talking about their hopes and dreams for the future. The more time Emma spent with Jack, the more certain she became that he was the man she wanted to spend her life with. He never tried to change her or make her into something she was not. He supported her work, encouraged her ambitions, and treated her with a respect and tenderness that made her feel treasured. It was in early January, during a particularly cold and difficult mail run, that Emma realized she wanted to marry Jack. They were fighting their way through a snowstorm, the wind cutting through their clothes despite their heavy coats and scarves. Emma's hands were numb despite the gloves, and she could barely see Dusty's ears through the blowing snow. Jack rode close beside her, occasionally reaching out to touch her arm or shoulder, making sure she was all right. When they finally made it to the way station at Copper Creek, half frozen and exhausted, the station master took one look at them and ordered them to stay the night. "You will die if you try to ride back in this," he said firmly. "The storm is getting worse, not better. You can have the back room. I will sleep out here by the fire." Emma was too cold and tired to argue. She and Jack huddled in the back room, wrapped in blankets and sitting close to the small stove that provided the only heat. Jack had his arm around her, sharing his warmth, and Emma leaned into him gratefully. "I am sorry," she said through chattering teeth. "I should have checked the weather more carefully before we left. I could have gotten us both killed." "Hush," Jack said, pulling her closer. "You could not have known the storm would be this bad. We are safe now, and that is what matters." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind howl outside. Gradually, Emma's shivering subsided and she felt warm enough to think clearly again. "Jack," she said softly, "do you ever think about the future? About what you want your life to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now?" "All the time," Jack said. "I think about having a place of my own, maybe a small ranch. Not as big as my father's place in Texas, but something I could build up and be proud of. I think about having a family, children to teach and watch grow up, and lately I think about doing all of that with you." Emma's breath caught. "Really, really," Jack said. He pulled back slightly so he could look into her eyes. "Emma, I know we have not been courting very long, but I am sure about you. I am sure about us. I want to marry you if you will have me. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to ride beside you on these mail routes until we are too old to sit a horse, and then I want to sit on the porch with you and watch the sunset. I want everything, Emma, as long as it is with you." Emma felt tears spill down her cheeks. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Jack Brennan. I want all of that too." Jack kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Emma kissed him back with all the love and longing she had been holding inside. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling through their tears. "We should probably wait until spring to have the wedding," Emma said practically. "Give us time to plan and save money." "Spring sounds perfect," Jack agreed. "That gives me time to build us a house. I have been looking at a piece of land just outside Santa Fe near the trail you ride. It has a good creek running through it and plenty of grass for horses and cattle. I think I have enough saved to buy it and start building." They talked late into the night, making plans for their future together. They would continue the mail route, with Emma carrying the mail and Jack providing protection. They would start a small ranch on the side, building it up gradually until it could support them both. They would have children, as many as God saw fit to give them, and raise them to be strong and independent like their mother, and kind and steady like their father. The storm blew itself out by morning, and Emma and Jack rode back to Santa Fe in bright sunshine, their hearts as light as the freshly fallen snow sparkled in the sun. As soon as they arrived back in town, they went to tell Mrs. Patterson the news. The landlady let out a squeal of delight and hugged them both, then immediately began planning the wedding. "It will be at the church, of course," she said, "and we will have the reception at the boarding house. I will make the cake myself, and we will invite everyone you know." "Oh, this is wonderful," Emma laughed, caught up in Mrs. Patterson's enthusiasm. She had never thought much about weddings before, had always assumed that if she married at all it would be a quick, simple ceremony. But Mrs. Patterson's excitement was contagious, and she found herself actually looking forward to planning the celebration. Over the next few months, Emma and Jack continued their mail runs while also preparing for their wedding and their future together. Jack spent every spare moment working on their house, and he enlisted the help of several men from the Broken Arrow Ranch. The structure rose quickly, a simple but sturdy two-room cabin with a porch facing east to catch the morning sun. Emma contributed by sewing curtains and saving money for furniture. She also continued her mail deliveries, but now they felt different, less like a lonely struggle and more like an adventure she was sharing with the man she loved. In March, Sheriff Garrett called them into his office with good news. The territorial governor was so pleased with the success of the armed escort program that he was increasing the pay for both Emma and Jack. He also presented them with a commendation for their bravery in capturing the bandits, along with the reward money he had promised. "This is enough to buy cattle," Jack said, looking at the money in wonder. "Emma, with this we can really start our ranch." They used the money to buy a small herd of cattle and some chickens, and Jack built a barn and corral on their property. Emma watched their little homestead take shape and felt a pride she had never experienced before. This was theirs, built together, a real home. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in May, when the wildflowers would be blooming and the weather would be warm and pleasant. Mrs. Patterson threw herself into the preparations with gusto, enlisting the help of half the women in Santa Fe. They sewed Emma a beautiful dress of cream-colored wool, simple but elegant, and Jack borrowed a fine suit from Matthew Carson. On the morning of the wedding, Emma woke early, too excited and nervous to sleep. Mrs. Patterson helped her dress and arranged her hair, pinning it up with small white flowers. When Emma looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the elegant woman staring back at her. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Patterson said, wiping away tears. "Your father would have been so proud." The church was packed with people when Emma arrived. It seemed like everyone they knew had come to celebrate with them. Emma saw the Garcias with all their children, Samuel Morrison looking proud in his Sunday best, Miss Abigail Stone dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Matthew Carson was there with several hands from the Broken Arrow, and Sheriff Garrett stood near the front, grinning broadly. But Emma only had eyes for Jack, who stood at the altar waiting for her. He looked impossibly handsome in his borrowed suit, his blue eyes shining with love and barely suppressed emotion. As Emma walked down the aisle toward him, she saw him swallow hard, and she realized he was fighting back tears. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. They exchanged vows before God and their community, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Jack kissed Emma with such tenderness that several people in the congregation sighed audibly. The reception at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was a joyous affair, with music and dancing and more food than Emma had ever seen in one place. People congratulated them and offered advice and gifts, quilts and dishes and tools for their new home. Emma danced with Jack until her feet hurt, and then she danced some more, not wanting the day to end. As the sun set and the party finally began to wind down, Jack pulled Emma aside. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Brennan?" he asked, and Emma thrilled at the sound of her new name. "More than ready," she said. They rode out to their cabin as the last light faded from the sky. Jack had prepared everything in advance, lighting lamps and building a fire in the hearth so that the little house glowed warmly in the darkness. He lifted Emma down from her horse and carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing. That night they came together as husband and wife, their lovemaking tender and passionate by turns. Emma had been nervous, having no real experience in such matters, but Jack was patient and gentle, and soon her nervousness melted away in the heat of desire. She fell asleep in his arms, feeling safer and more content than she ever had in her life. The next morning they woke to birdsong and sunshine streaming through the windows. Jack made coffee while Emma cooked breakfast, and they sat together on their porch, eating and watching the cattle graze in their pasture. "Happy?" Jack asked, taking her hand. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Emma said honestly. "I was so used to being alone, Jack. I never imagined I could feel this way, so complete and full of joy." "You are never going to be alone again," Jack promised. "We are in this together now for better or worse until death do us part." They fell into the rhythm of married life easily. They continued to run the mail route together 3 times a week, and the rest of the time they worked on building up their ranch. Jack proved to be a skilled cattleman, and their herd grew steadily. Emma tended her chickens and started a garden, finding unexpected pleasure in coaxing vegetables from the hard New Mexico soil. By summer, Emma suspected she might be pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Jack, wanting to be sure before she got his hopes up. When she finally told him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jack let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, his face alight with wonder. "Emma, we are going to be parents." "You are happy then?" Emma asked, though she already knew the answer. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Jack said. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "This is everything I ever wanted, Emma. A home, a wife I love more than life itself, and now a child. I feel like the luckiest man in the world." Emma's pregnancy progressed smoothly. She continued to ride the mail routes until she was 6 months along, and only then did she reluctantly agree to stay home and let Jack handle the deliveries with help from a young man the sheriff had hired. She did not like being idle, but she had to admit that the rest was probably good for her and the baby. Mrs. Patterson came out to the cabin regularly to check on her, bringing supplies and news from town. "You are glowing, dear," she would say, and Emma would smile, knowing it was true. She felt beautiful and powerful, her body doing the miraculous work of creating new life. In February of 1884, on a cold but clear night, Emma went into labor. Jack rode into Santa Fe to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Chen, an older Chinese woman who had delivered half the babies in town. Mrs. Patterson came too, and between the 2 experienced women, they guided Emma through the long hours of labor. Jack stayed by Emma's side the whole time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. When the pain became almost unbearable, it was his voice she focused on, his steady encouragement that kept her going. "You can do this, Emma," he said over and over. "You are the strongest woman I know. Just a little bit more, my love. Just a little bit more." Finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, their son was born. He came into the world with a lusty cry, his tiny face red and furious, and Emma fell in love with him instantly. Mrs. Chen cleaned him up and placed him in Emma's arms, and Emma looked down at the perfect little person she and Jack had created together. "He is beautiful," Jack whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Emma, he is perfect." They named him Thomas after Emma's father and William after Jack's. Tom for short. He was a healthy baby with Jack's blue eyes and Emma's dark hair, and he seemed to take up all the space in their small cabin with his presence. The first few months of parenthood were exhausting but wonderful. Emma was amazed by how much she loved this tiny human, how fiercely protective she felt. Jack was a devoted father, getting up with her for night feedings and changing diapers without complaint. Watching him cradle their son and sing soft lullabies, Emma fell in love with him all over again. By the time Tom was 6 months old, Emma was back to riding the mail routes, though now they brought the baby along in a specially designed sling. Tom seemed to enjoy the rides, often falling asleep to the rhythm of the horse's gait. The people along the route made a fuss over him, and Emma found that delivering the mail was even more enjoyable now that she could share it with her son. Life settled into a new pattern. They worked hard, building up their ranch and raising their son. Jack hired a couple of ranch hands to help with the cattle, and Emma took on an assistant to help with the mail deliveries when needed. Their little operation was growing, becoming more successful than either of them had dared to hope. When Tom was 2, Emma became pregnant again. This time it was a girl born in the spring of 1886. They named her Sarah after Jack's mother. She was a quieter baby than Tom had been, with Emma's gray eyes and a serious expression that made everyone laugh. "She is going to be the smart one," Mrs. Patterson predicted, and she was right. As Sarah grew, it became clear that she had inherited her mother's sharp mind and determination. The years passed quickly, full of hard work and simple joys. Tom grew into a sturdy, adventurous boy who followed his father everywhere, learning to ride and rope almost before he could walk properly. Sarah was more bookish, preferring to stay inside with Emma and help with the household accounts or read from the books Miss Stone lent them. In 1888, they had another son whom they named Daniel. He was a happy, easygoing baby who seemed to find joy in everything. Their cabin had grown too small for their expanding family, so Jack built an addition, adding 2 more rooms and a larger porch. Emma continued to carry the mail until she was 40, and then she finally passed the route on to a young woman named Catherine Miller, who reminded Emma of herself at that age. Tough, independent, and fearless. Emma trained Catherine personally, teaching her all the tricks and shortcuts she had learned over the years. Jack gradually transitioned from ranch hand to full-time rancher, and by the time he was 50, the Brennan Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the territory. They had a substantial herd of cattle, good horses, and a reputation for fair dealing that brought buyers from as far as Denver. But success and prosperity were not what made Emma happiest. What she treasured most were the quiet moments, sitting on the porch with Jack in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains they both loved, reading to the children before bed, teaching Sarah to ride and watching Tom practice roping with his father. The small intimacies of married life that had become more precious with each passing year. When Tom turned 18 in 1902, he announced that he wanted to join the Army. Emma's heart broke a little, but she understood. He was young and restless, eager to see the world beyond New Mexico. They saw him off at the train station, Emma crying despite her determination not to, and Jack gripping his son's shoulder with fierce pride. Sarah showed no interest in leaving. She had inherited her parents' love of the land and announced that she planned to stay and help run the ranch. She also began courting a young schoolteacher named Robert Chen, the grandson of the midwife who had delivered her. Emma approved of the match, seeing in Robert the same kindness and steadiness that had drawn her to Jack all those years ago. Daniel was still too young to know what he wanted, but he showed signs of having his father's way with horses. Jack began training him in earnest, teaching him everything he knew about breaking and training horses. In 1904, Sarah married Robert in the same church where Emma and Jack had wed 20 years earlier. It was a beautiful ceremony, and Emma cried tears of joy as she watched her daughter exchange vows. Afterward, at the reception, Jack pulled Emma onto the dance floor. "Remember our wedding?" He asked, holding her close. "Like it was yesterday," Emma said. She rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him. "We have had a good life, have we not?" "The best life," Jack agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible. And it all started because I saw a beautiful woman trying to fix her gloves and could not help but offer her mine." Emma laughed. "Best decision you ever made." "Second best," Jack corrected. The best decision was asking you to marry me." Tom came home from the army in 1906, older and more serious, but still fundamentally the same good-hearted boy they had raised. He surprised them by announcing that he had met a girl in Arizona and wanted to bring her home to meet them. Her name was Lily, and she was the daughter of a cavalry officer. Emma liked her immediately, recognizing in her the same spirit of adventure that had led Emma herself to carry the mail across dangerous territory. Tom and Lily married that fall and settled on a piece of land adjacent to the Brennan ranch. They built their own house and started their own herd, and suddenly the family operation was even larger. In 1908, Emma became a grandmother for the first time when Sarah gave birth to a daughter. They named her Emma after her grandmother, and Emma Brennan cried when she held the tiny baby for the first time, marveling at the circle of life and the continuation of their family line. More grandchildren followed. Tom and Lily had twin boys in 1910, and Sarah had another daughter in 1912. Daniel married a girl from Santa Fe in 1914 and brought her home to live on the ranch. The Brennan property rang with the laughter of children, and the dinner table grew longer to accommodate the growing family. Emma and Jack grew older together gracefully. Jack's hair turned silver, but his blue eyes remained as bright as ever. Emma's hands, once rough and work-worn, became gnarled with age, but they were still capable, still strong. They still rode out together sometimes, just the two of them, following the old mail route and remembering the early days of their courtship. One evening in 1920, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jack turned to Emma and took her hand. "You remember that first day we met?" he asked. "When I found you trying to fix your gloves." "Of course I do," Emma said. "I was sitting on that rock by the way station, thinking my life was as hard and lonely as it could possibly be, and then you rode up and changed everything." "I took one look at you and I knew," Jack said. "I knew you were going to be important to me. I did not know how yet, but I felt it all the way to my bones." "I felt it too," Emma admitted. "It scared me how quickly I fell for you. I had spent so long being independent, convincing myself I did not need anyone. And then there you were, offering me your gloves, and I realized that accepting help did not make me weak. It made me human." Jack lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You gave me everything I ever wanted, Emma Brennan, a home, a family, a purpose. I have loved you every day of our marriage, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too," Emma said, tears sliding down her weathered cheeks. "With everything I am, Jack, you are my home, my heart, my everything." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and red. Around them, their land stretched out in all directions. The pastures where their cattle grazed, the barn where their horses whinnied softly, the houses where their children and grandchildren slept. It was a legacy they had built together, stone by stone, day by day, and it would outlast them both. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their family. Sarah helping her daughter with homework, Daniel discussing tomorrow's work with his hired hands, the grandchildren playing some noisy game that involved a lot of running and laughter. It was a full, rich life, built on the foundation of love and partnership. Emma leaned her head on Jack's shoulder and closed her eyes, feeling utterly content. She thought about that cold December day in 1883 when she had been sitting alone, trying to mend her only pair of gloves, wondering how she was going to survive the winter. She could never have imagined then that a chance encounter with a wandering cowboy would lead to all of this. A love that had sustained her through nearly 40 years, children who made her proud, grandchildren who brought her joy, and a home that was the product of their shared dreams and hard work. Jack's arms tightened around her, and she knew he was thinking along the same lines. They had been lucky, incredibly lucky, to find each other in that vast and often harsh territory. But luck was only part of it. They had also chosen each other every day through good times and bad, through struggles and triumphs. They had built something real and lasting, something that would endure, Thank you, Emma whispered. For what? Jack asked. For giving me your gloves that day, Emma said. For saying you would make do on your own. For seeing me and offering help without making me feel small or incapable. For everything that came after. It was the easiest decision I ever made, Jack said. And the best. You are welcome, Emma Brennan. You will always be welcome in my heart. They sat together on the porch until the stars came out, holding hands and watching the night sky spread above them like a blanket. Inside the house, their family went about their evening routines, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and protected. And out on the range, the cattle settled down for the night, the horses dozed in their stalls, and the land that Emma and Jack had worked so hard to build rested under the endless New Mexico sky. The years that followed were good ones. Emma and Jack gradually slowed down, leaving most of the ranch work to their children and hired hands, but they remained involved and engaged with the family business. Jack taught his grandsons to ride and rope, passing on the skills his own father had taught him. Emma taught her granddaughters to be strong and independent, sharing stories of her days carrying the mail and showing them that women could do anything they set their minds to. In 1925, on their 40th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a grand party. It seemed like half of New Mexico showed up to celebrate with them. Sheriff Garrett, now retired and walking with a cane, made a speech about the early days when Emma had been one of his most reliable mail carriers. Mrs. Patterson, now in her 90s and still sharp as a tack, told embarrassing stories about Emma and Jack's courtship. Matthew Carson, also retired and passing the Broken Arrow Ranch to his son, raised a toast to Jack's skill and integrity. But the best moment came when Tom stood up and spoke about his parents. He talked about growing up watching them work together as equal partners, supporting and encouraging each other. He spoke of the lessons they had taught him about love and commitment, about sticking with something even when it was hard, about building a life brick by brick through determination and mutual respect. My parents taught me that love is not just a feeling, Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. It is a choice you make every day. It is work and sacrifice and compromise, but it is also the most rewarding thing you can do with your life. Dad, Mom, thank you for showing us what a real marriage looks like. Thank you for building a home and a family that we are all proud to be part of. Happy anniversary! Everyone raised their glasses and cheered, and Emma found herself crying again, overwhelmed by gratitude for the life she had lived and the love she had been blessed with. Jack and Emma danced that night, moving slowly and carefully around the floor, but still moving together in perfect harmony after 40 years of practice. Emma rested her head on Jack's chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart, and she thought that this was what happiness felt like. Not fireworks or grand gestures, but simply being held by the person you loved most in the world, surrounded by the family you had built together. As the party wound down and the guests began to leave, Emma and Jack stood at the door, thanking people for coming and accepting their congratulations. When the last guest had departed and the house was finally quiet, they walked out to the porch one more time, drawn by habit and the beauty of the star-filled night. 40 years, Jack marveled. Has it really been that long? In some ways it feels like yesterday, Emma said. In other ways, I can barely remember life before you. I cannot remember it at all, Jack said. Or rather, I do not want to. You are my life, Emma. You have been since that first day. They stood together in comfortable silence, and Emma thought about all the moments that had brought them to this point. The fear and excitement of their first kiss, the joy of their wedding day, the terror and wonder of becoming parents, the quiet contentment of growing old together. It had not always been easy. They had faced droughts and disease, lost cattle, and struggled through lean years. They had argued and disagreed, had moments of frustration and doubt. But they had always come back to each other, always chosen to stay and work it out, and that had made all the difference. I would do it all again, Emma said suddenly. Every bit of it, The hard parts and the good parts, I would choose you again in a heartbeat, Jack Brennan. Jack turned to her and smiled, and even after 40 years, that smile still made her heart skip a beat. And I would choose you, Emma Brennan, forever and always. He kissed her then, and it was sweet and familiar and perfect. When they finally broke apart, Emma realized that this was what she had been searching for all those years ago when she had been alone and struggling to survive. Not just someone to help her carry the load, but someone to share the journey with. Someone who saw her as an equal and a partner. Someone who would give her his gloves and say he would make do on his own, not because he pitied her but because he cared. They went inside hand in hand, ready for bed and ready for whatever the next day would bring. Their children were settled in their own homes, their grandchildren were growing up strong and healthy, and their ranch was thriving. It was more than Emma had ever dared to hope for, more than she had ever dreamed possible. As she lay down beside Jack that night, her hand in his just as it had been on their wedding night 40 years ago, Emma offered up a silent prayer of thanksgiving. She was grateful for the hard years that had taught her strength, grateful for the chance encounter that had brought Jack into her life, grateful for every moment they had shared and every moment still to come. Jack's breathing deepened as he fell asleep, but Emma stayed awake a little longer, savoring the feeling of his warm presence beside her. She thought about that young woman who had been sitting on a rock outside Copper Creek, desperately trying to fix her only pair of gloves and wondering how she would survive. She wished she could go back and tell that woman not to worry, that help was coming in the form of a kind-eyed cowboy who would change her life forever. But maybe that young woman had known, on some deep level, when she looked up and saw Jack for the first time. Maybe she had felt the same certainty that Emma felt now, that this was meant to be, that their lives were meant to intersect and intertwine, that from that moment forward they would walk through life together. Emma smiled in the darkness and finally let herself drift off to sleep, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, she and Jack would face it together, just as they had faced everything else for the past 40 years. They had built something beautiful and lasting, and it would continue long after they were gone, in the children and grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. The story of how a cowboy found a woman mending her only pair of gloves and offered her his own, saying he would make do on his own, was told and retold in the family for generations. It became more than just a story about how Emma and Jack met. It became a lesson about kindness and generosity, about seeing someone in need and offering help without expecting anything in return. It became a reminder that the smallest acts of compassion could change the course of a life, could set in motion events that would ripple outward for decades. Emma and Jack lived to see their golden anniversary, celebrated in 1935 with an even bigger party than their 40th anniversary. They were both in their 80s by then, moving slowly but still sharp-minded and full of life. They had 11 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren, and the Brennan Ranch had become one of the most respected operations in all of New Mexico. On the day of their 50th anniversary, Emma sat in her favorite rocking chair on the porch, watching her family gather for the celebration. Jack was beside her in his own chair, and they held hands just as they always had. The party was in full swing around them, but for a moment, Emma felt removed from it all, able to see it from a distance and appreciate the full scope of what they had created. There was Tom, now 51 and a successful rancher in his own right, laughing with his twin sons. There was Sarah, 49 and running the family ranch with her husband Robert, directing the preparations with quiet efficiency. There was Daniel, 47 and training horses just as his father had trained them, demonstrating his technique to an eager group of younger relatives. And there were the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, running and playing just as their parents and grandparents had done before them. "Look at what we made," Emma said softly to Jack. "I am looking," Jack said, his voice full of wonder. "It is something, is it not?" "It is everything," Emma said. That night, long after the party had ended and the family had gone to their respective homes, Emma and Jack lay in bed together, too tired to talk but not quite ready to sleep. Emma thought about the journey they had taken together, from that first meeting to this golden anniversary. 50 years of marriage, of partnership, of love. It seemed both impossibly long and impossibly short at the same time. "Jack," she whispered in the darkness, "are you awake?" "I am awake," he replied. "I just wanted to tell you one more time," Emma said. "I love you. I have loved you since the day we met, and I will love you until the day I die." "I love you too, Emma," Jack said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, the only thing I ever got completely right." They fell asleep together, hands clasped, hearts beating in sync after 50 years of practice. And when they woke the next morning to another beautiful New Mexico sunrise, they were still together, still in love, still grateful for the miracle that had brought them together on that cold December day so long ago. Emma Brennan lived to be 88 years old, and Jack lived to be 90. They were blessed with good health and sharp minds right up until the end, and they remained devoted to each other through all their years together. When Emma finally passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1948, Jack followed her just 6 months later, as if he could not bear to be without her for very long. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch with a simple headstone that read, "Emma and Jack Brennan. Together forever." At the funeral, their children and grandchildren spoke about the love that had sustained Emma and Jack through 53 years of marriage. They told the story of how they met, of the gloves and the generosity that had sparked a romance for the ages. And they promised to carry on the legacy of love and partnership that Emma and Jack had established. The Brennan Ranch continued to thrive under the management of subsequent generations. Sarah and Robert's children took over the operation, and then their children after that. The land that Emma and Jack had worked so hard to build up remained in the family, a testament to their vision and determination. But more than the land or the cattle or the house they had built, Emma and Jack's real legacy was the love they had shared and the example they had set. They had shown their children and grandchildren what it meant to truly partner with someone, to work together toward common goals while respecting each other's independence and strength. They had demonstrated that love was not just passion and romance, though they had plenty of that, but also patience and compromise and the daily choice to put someone else's needs alongside your own. The story of the cowboy who found a woman mending her only pair of gloves and offered her his own, saying he would make do on his own, became family legend. It was told at weddings and anniversaries, shared with new generations as they came along, held up as an example of the kind of selfless love that built lasting relationships. And though Emma and Jack were gone, their love lived on in the family they had created, in the land they had tended, and in the hearts of everyone who had known them. They had taken a chance encounter on a cold winter day and turned it into a lifetime of love and partnership. They had built something beautiful together, something that would endure long after they were gone. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the struggles or the hardships they had faced, but the love that had sustained them through it all. The love that had begun with a simple act of kindness and had grown into something powerful and enduring. The love that had proven, beyond any doubt, that sometimes the smallest gestures could have the biggest impact, and that two people committed to each other could build a life more beautiful than either could have imagined alone. Emma and Jack Brennan's story was a testament to the power of love, to the importance of partnership, and to the incredible things that could happen when two people chose to walk through life together. It was a story that deserved to be remembered and retold, generation after generation, as a reminder of what was possible when you opened your heart to someone and gave them not just your gloves, but your whole self forever.